In the AG studio today, we're very happy to have the phenomenal Julian Lage.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm thrilled.
You know, Julian, there's one thing that I notice when I watch you play,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a real a look of joy and ecstasy in your face.
Yeah.
Do you know that happens when you're playing?
I've come to be aware of it because I've seen enough YouTube videos of myself.
Right.
But it's one of these funny things. I think it's always been genuine, but increasingly as my technique has evolved and I've eased up in certain areas and whatnot, I do find that there are these moments that I I'm involved with playing the guitar, and I just kind of go, whoa, like that's amazing. I can't help but smile. Not necessarily something I did, but just kind of reality kicks in for a second. You know, you go, holy cow, like this is going along, and I thought it would be a train wreck, and all of a sudden it was actually really interesting or humorous. Or, so it's kind of a dynamic relationship I have with it, and it makes sense it would, you know, reveal itself through my expression. Yeah.
You know, you have a very delicate touch. I've noticed that. Is this something that that you found when you were learning how to play guitar, that it's best to be delicate rather than attacking?
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I often feel like I'm way too heavy-handed on the guitar. When I was a kid, you know, like a small kid, when I was 5 and 6 and 7, through those years, the guitars were always so much bigger that I basically played with every ounce of muscular energy I had just to kind of make it happen. And then as I grew up and became bigger in stature, I realized that a lot of that was superfluous. You know, I was gripping these small body guitars, but I was, you know, twice the size. I thought, well, that doesn't, it seems like wasted energy. And I also started studying with different people who would talk a lot about how, you know, my favorite was a quote from Juanito Pascual, a wonderful flamenco guitarist. He said, you know, the left hand's job is not dissimilar from, you know, displacing water in a puddle with your foot. That was so poetic. But essentially you trust that when you step in the puddle, the water will move. And I think more than delicacy, it's a trust that if I interact with it, the string will be depressed, the sound will happen. And when I catch myself playing too hard, it's often when I don't trust it, or I want to impress someone, or I'm nervous. And it was good to realize that, because sometimes you do need a heavy touch. If you're in an old time band and you want to be heard playing this or that, you should be able to be as, you know, full out as you want, but also go the other direction. That brings up another thing. You play so many different kinds of music. I mean, you're very eclectic. You go from, you know, playing free and avant-garde type stuff with people like Nels Cline to very, very folky stuff with Chris Eldridge, who you just have a new album out with. That's right.
Do you get, you know, do you feel like your head's spinning sometimes?
Yeah, most of the time. Most of the time. I it's not on purpose, you know. I think by nature I like doing a lot of things at the same time. Often to a fault where it's tough for me to do one thing thoroughly. But with regard to avant-garde and bluegrass and modern jazz or singer-songwriter stuff, you know, they all have the guitar in common. And they all deal with narrative, they all deal with tension and release, and they all deal with having your facility be kind of not an issue. You know, there are things where you just need to be, or you aspire to be as able to fulfill whatever musical idea you have. So I like it for that reason, just from a practical point of view. If I play a lot of things, I have to play my best, or at least try. And Lord knows, there's a lot further to go in every project I have. But I get a kick out of it, you know. I also respect the people who are just bluegrass guitar players who devote their life to it, or are just avant-garde. I'm just very lucky that I get to kind of peek into those worlds and set up shop for a little bit. Today you brought in a Waterloo, which is a brand new Collings-made instrument, and it's light as a feather. Tell me about that guitar. I'm obsessed with this guitar. I've been friends with the folks at Collings for a while now, and they've just been, Bill and Steve and Mark, they've just been wonderful as people, just checking in. Hey, we're working on this. What do you think of that? And I've tried their electrics and their flat tops. I've always been a fan. But my main guitar was always, has been up until recently, a Martin 1939 0018. Beautiful. And that's what you use with Chris Eldridge. I use that with Critter, and with, because he has a 3070 18, and they're like best friends, those guitars. I've kind of been on the hunt for a newer guitar that I felt had what I looked for in a vintage guitar, but I just haven't found it. And Mark over at Collings, he said, well, we're working on these guitars. They're called Waterloos, and they're basically like Kalamazoos, you know, Gibson's old subsidiary that made relatively cheap, lightweight, light build guitars. And this one's ladder braced, and I haven't played many ladder braced guitars in my life that I wanted to own, but I thought were charming, you know. And then they sent me this guitar, and it's just the most in tune, agile, warm, broken in guitar, and it's like a month old.
That's amazing.
And it's incredible. And it has this one has a very wide neck, or kind of a thick neck. They make one with a thinner neck, but it's a thick neck, no truss rod, and it just, I like the fact that it shakes. It feels like it's alive, and especially for solo guitar, I want a guitar that interacts with me. Mm-hmm. Where if I'm kind of being oblivious and just laying into something, the guitar is going to kind of go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, do you hear all that buzzing? That's you, you know? And so when I rein it in, it really rewards gentle touch, a certain degree of fluidity, and
all those things that are important to you as a player.
These are just things that, and I don't, they're just important to me. And I love so much music that doesn't cultivate those things. Mm-hmm. But for me, I know that's kind of where I trend towards. And I haven't found a better guitar for what I do than this.
You have a new album, World's Fair.
Yeah.
And is the title, is it suggestive of the kind of music that's inside? Is it kind of a trip around the world?
Well, in a way it is, yeah. I always had a fascination with just world's fairs, world expositions, and they've been going on for ages. And sometimes I think about it and I talk about it like this. There's this tragic hopefulness, like these world fairs were often designed to show the potential of a culture or civilization. And some things, panned out, and a lot of things didn't. The flying cars and whatnot didn't. It's not exactly like the Jetsons, but I love that hopeful quality, while also being kind of out of date. It's just an aesthetic consideration I've always thought was intriguing. In writing this music, I had limitations. I wanted to be for one flat top acoustic guitar, no overdubs, music I could ostensibly sit down anywhere and play for someone. Which in my life I haven't really had that. I've been more dependent on ensembles, trios and duos, and going between rhythm and lead. So that was a thing. And I realized as I was kind of making up these parameters, it could only be in standard tuning or drop D or with a capo. Those were the three things. When I was looking at these, it seemed kind of tragically out of date in the age where you could do stuff with pedals, you could do a brilliant production with Pro Tools and all this stuff. I thought, wow, this kind of makes no sense. It's almost irrelevant from the start. But in that is a certain charm factor. I thought, well, okay, let me take that on. I'd rather have limitations and be able to do anything.
Right.
And the parallel to that for me was this World's Fair, a celebration of things that, whether they panned out or not, are still worth giving time to.
In terms of learning how to play, you've been playing from a very, very early age.
Yeah. And
everybody has influences. Pat Metheny, whoever, Andre Segovia, whoever.
Yeah.
How do you, once you listen to those influences and learn, how do you develop your own voice?
That's a great question. I don't inherently believe it's something you actively or even consciously do. Mm-hmm. I think you can. I think there's, when I've had to make a record, say, okay, I'm going to make a solo guitar record, I'm going to make a trio record, I have to consider what things I associate with that'll be mine. Like, why would this record need to come out when there's all these other great records of solo guitarists or trios? But I think often when I hear players, I think they have a sound. I feel like I'm hearing is their relationship to the things they love. I'm hearing that they love, 70% of their love goes towards this, and 30% is allocated toward this, and then you get this mashup, so to speak.
Right.
So my conviction has pretty consistently been towards the things that I'm a nerd about, and then people will hear and say, "Oh, that sounds like you," and I hear it, and I hear like 8 different things that I like. So that I just think I think you have it. I've noticed this with a lot of younger players too. When I see people who've been playing, not even younger, but if they've been playing 6 months or a week, everyone has their own chemistry with the guitar.
Right.
And I love that because you see, oh, that's just going to get refined. You'll learn stuff, you'll throw stuff away, but you haven't ever not had your voice. This has always been my takeaway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you play like Elizabeth Cotten or whatever.
Yeah.
You're a freight train. The melody's there.
Yeah.
But then it's yours. As you play, it becomes very much yours. And I hear in that song what I hear in other songs that you do. So and that's your voice. And
that's cool.
So when you work up a traditional, a very, very well-known traditional like that. Does it take time for that voice to come in, that voice of yours to come in?
It does, but it absolutely does. But it's not usually super long. Mm-hmm. But often, if I learn like Freight Train or I'm playing the song when I first learned it, I played it straight a lot. Just, oh wow, okay, that's the voice leading, there's the internal voices, that's the melody, and I just thought that was so cool. And anything I ever would add to it, I would hope would be as interesting to me at least as would just be playing the melody. And I confess a lot of times I hear myself extrapolating on these things after the fact and I just go, why didn't I just stop while I was ahead, But that's
what improvising is all about.
That's exactly what it's about. I mean, you kind of have to, you jump off the ledge and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Right. I increasingly see that, if the song is good, it's hard to mess it up.